Advocacy Project, or NEDAP. Today I am here to represent New Yorkers for Responsible Lending, or NYRL, a statewide coalition of 147 organizations committed to fighting abusive and discriminatory practices in the financial services industry. We are here today to talk about the rampant abuses being perpetrated by the debt collection industry, especially by debt buyers, companies that buy old debts for pennies on the dollar and then use abusive tactics to try to collect those debts. Every year, debt buyers file hundreds of thousands of junk lawsuits in New York and get judgments that wreak havoc on people's lives. Debt buyers use these judgments to freeze people's bank accounts and garnish their wages, leaving New Yorkers unable to pay for their basic needs like rent, utilities, food, and medication, and draining the financial resources of elderly, disabled, and low-income New Yorkers. In a moment, you will hear from New Yorkers who are directly harmed by these abusive judgments. We are here today to send a strong, loud message that these abuses must stop. There's a bill pending in the state legislature called the Consumer Credit Fairness Act, introduced by Senator Eric Schneiderman and Assemblymember Helene Weinstein, which will address these abusive practices. Many of us will be testifying in support of that bill later this morning at an Assembly hearing. It is absolutely vital that this bill gets passed before the end of the legislative session, so debt buyers cannot keep getting away with their abusive tactics and harming New Yorkers.
Good morning. My name is Ria Rabadwin. I'm 57 years old and I live in Queens. I work as a nanny. Over the last 3 years, I was sued by 4 different debt buyers in 4 separate lawsuits. I was not served with court papers in any of these lawsuits. 2 of these debt buyers froze my bank account and took $8,000 from my savings. All 4 debt buyers sued me for debt I didn't legally owe.
My name is Roberta Gutterman. I am 60 years old, live in Brooklyn. I am disabled and survive on Social Security disability. I got a letter about an old debt. I did not want to be sued, so I agreed to pay $25, even though I was paying every month a default judgment against me for over $10,000. I never received a summons and complaint.
Debt collection is a big business in New York. Almost 300,000 lawsuits are filed in New York City alone each year, which is more than the total number of lawsuits filed in federal district courts across the country. Many of these cases are filed by bottom-feeding debt buyer companies, and many of these cases are absolutely meritless. They're filed without any proof of the debt, they're filed without notice to consumers, and they're filed on debts that many defendants do not even owe because they're the wrong person being sued, or the debt is beyond the statute of limitations, or the company that's suing them doesn't even own the debt. More than 99% of these consumers are unrepresented by counsel. Our most vulnerable members of society are expected to navigate the court system and all of its complicated rules and procedures by themselves. The Consumer Credit Fairness Act, which is pending in the state legislature, will help our most vulnerable New Yorkers by preventing meritless lawsuits from being filed to begin with, and by giving consumers basic information they need to defend themselves and to settle legitimate cases.
We represent 125,000 New York City employees, their families, and approximately 40,000 retirees. Our members are all hard-working, low-paid workers who are often the victims of abuses by debt collectors. Often their salaries are garnished, their bank accounts are frozen, their seized, liens are placed on real property, causing property to be sold because of these liens, without any opportunity to challenge the actions taken against them. The legislation we're supporting today will go a long way toward leveling the playing field and adding a layer of due process under the Constitution, protecting our members from some of the abusive practices that are prevailing in this industry.
AARP is here today to call upon our state elected officials to pass the Consumer Credit Fairness Act, sponsored by Senators Schneiderman and Assemblywoman Weinstein. Unfortunately, many older New Yorkers have found themselves caught up in the recent surge of predatory debt collection practices. For older people on fixed incomes, the recent economic downturn and the ever-rising cost of basic necessities such as food and medicine have made this even more difficult. They simply cannot afford to be victimized by unfair and unscrupulous debt collection practices. It is critical that the New York State Legislature act on this problem before the end of this legislative session in June.
Debt buyers from using these abusive tactics to keep harming New Yorkers, especially elderly, disabled, and low-income New Yorkers. Thank you.
Matin